there was almost this realization that I could probably do more good outside the government than I could inside the government.
Yeah.
Because there's this intersection of public and private where the government needs to leverage the private sector more so and to a greater degree than they're doing right now. When it comes to attracting talent to the government, like that's a major problem.
Absolutely.
Just the sheer amount of time that people have to wait. And then especially if you work in tech, which I had and which I went to Stanford. I know a lot of people who were comp sci majors and like who ended up immediately after graduation getting a job at Google that's basically paying almost like $200K. So it's like, why would you then put your life on hold to wait for 3 years to go and work for the government and make like $80K?
I remember when I was getting recruited coming out of Afghanistan, coming out of the military for a couple different organizations. They're like, yeah, this is where you start. And I did the math and I was like, wait, I'm getting a pay cut?
Yeah.
What just happened?
I made more when I was 22 than I did when I was 29. And I mean,
Not great, Bob. Yeah. So, you know, you got Sarah there. Awesome story. Ridiculous journey. Very big to click into the spirit animal and learn more about that later. But Dylan, you know, in the other side of that spectrum, right? Sort of new entrant coming in. Talk to me about sort of where you came from, what drew you in here, and sort of what you were looking forward to, right? As you've got this whole, you know, awesome career ahead of you. What gets you excited about it?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in politics, government, and on the side, I've always been a tech enthusiast, hobbyist, super interested in how technology is influencing and changing our lives. So when I was in college, I was basically trying to figure out how to marry those two things as best I could, and then figure out how to get someone to pay me for it. So I did some that's the hard part. I went to Rutgers University. I did some research when I was there with a professor for a law review article about the intersection of public policy and technology. I was also fortunate while I was at Rutgers to win the Truman Scholarship, which is a federal scholarship for students that have a demonstrated history of public policy work / public service work and who are interested in potentially doing that as a career. So I was fortunate to win that scholarship. As part of that scholarship, they encourage you after you graduate from college to do a fellowship with either a government agency in the executive branch or a nonprofit that works closely with the government. SVDG was on that list of potential places to do the fellowship with. I had a previous stint when I was in college as a contractor for the Department of Transportation. Another policy area that I was really interested in and still am is transportation policy. I sit on the board of directors for a nonprofit called Students Against Destructive Decisions, or SAD. So I was sort of deciding whether
it's not drunk driving anymore.
It's not drunk driving.
God, I feel old.
In 19,
holy shit!
I'll give you, and it was. No. I have to say, because I'm on the board of directors, it was never drunk driving. It was Students Against Driving Drunk. There's a semantic difference between those two different things.
Feels like a rabbit hole.
Super rabbit hole. But they changed the name in 1997. So I was deciding whether to keep going down that transportation policy thing or take a gamble on this very new startup-y nonprofit where I would come in as essentially the second employee actually working there and do that instead. And as much as I love the folks at the DOT, it was, office, cubicle, government work. And I thought it'd be interesting to take it my first career step outside of government and see how that was. So did the fellowship with SVDG the summer after I graduated, and then got hired full-time after that. Basically, Sam, I think you had on another episode, basically was like, you want to stay on full-time? And I said, this is cool. I would love to stay on full-time. And it's been great ever since.
So I'm going to go back to Dylan, and I'm going to come back to you sort of on the tech talent, right? Because you both, I don't think I realized I was sort of sandwiched in between intellectual royalty here with Stanford and a Truman Scholar. Jesus, save some for the rest of us. But as you look, Dylan, as you look across sort of like your demographic, right? Younger, entering the workforce, sort of digitally native, right? Like I remember, I really didn't know what a computer was. They were like, do you want to take computers at West Point? I was like, that's for dorks.
Take computers.
Yeah, it was like IT 305, and it was like you had to take apart a computer and put it back together was part of it.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
But I don't think it wasn't something we grew up where like it was ingrained. It was just a part of life, right? You've got a generation now that, and I see it with my boys who are a generation or two behind you, that they are already able to figure stuff out before I am. But then I juxtapose that with like this industrial approach to process and everything that the department or, the IC brings in, where it takes 5 years for a clearance, or it takes 9 months for a job offer to be approved to then start. There's a lot that happens in a world where we're by the tweet or by the second. How do I then approach a demographic and say, hey, I need you to change your whole notion of time and fit that and conform into this behemoth? Like, how do we get the next generation of leaders in here?
Yeah, I mean, this was the big struggle I had during my time at the Department of Transportation, because it was really like, like you said, our generation is conditioned to have not just technology be a given, but that rapid iteration of technology, that things are always changing. I use the example of the first ever phone I had, proper smartphone, was an iPhone 4. And within 5 years, I had a phone that far surpassed the capabilities of a phone I had 4 years ago. And my generation was conditioned to that type of rapid tech advancement for every aspect of our lives. I mean, like my PlayStation 2 compared to the PS5 that I own now, and the graphical difference between those two, that was just expected, that every few years you would get that type of improvement. So when I came into an agency like the Department of Transportation, and you see all of these different issues on the horizon, whether it's, new automated features inside vehicles, what the OEMs are working on, autonomous driving. And I come in ready to work I was at NHTSA, specifically the agency tasked with a lot of those things. And there was one person working on it, and she had 5 other things to do, and it was not a priority. And I was here, I was there for a short period of time, and I'm like,
in Charlie Wilson's War.
I'm like,
upstairs.
Exactly. I'm like, hey, I'm here. We have 6 months. It's so much time, in a year. If I can get a new iPhone in 6 months, we should be able to make good progress writing down some new policies based on the regulations. And it was not that. And that was a super rude awakening. And I'm seeing that with my friends now, fellow Truman scholars that did end up going and working at federal agencies. They're doing amazing work, but their potential is kind of being limited by the environment that they found themselves in. And eventually, and I'm already seeing this given that it's been a few years, they're going to decide to leave government and pursue other endeavors on the outside that may or may not ultimately relate back to how we run our country. And it's unfortunate because it's talent being lost.
Yeah. I mean, I think I see absolutely the challenges in recruitment and sort of how do we reach that generation. Retention is another one, as you look sort of mid-career and have been in and out. How are we enticing folks to stay and sort of giving them the opportunities? I think, probably over the last year and a half, I don't think I've gone a week without someone senior in either the IC, the DoD saying, hey, can you help me understand commercial tech markets so I can get out of the government?
Yeah.
That's not a good sign. Right?
No.
Like this exodus of institutional knowledge is potentially quite dangerous. Right. So how can we solve that problem?
I mean, that's a very good question. I don't have an answer
That's
for
a
you on that.
Question. Come on.
I don't have an answer for you on that. I would say overall, I mean, I think one of the things that's interesting is everyone in government, like you see this insane amount of wealth creation and also the speed of progress that happens in tech.
Yeah.
And at least like coming from my background, like I was interested in commercial tech. I was interested in great power competition. So much of that is coming from the private sector, and it's accelerating so quickly. And almost in government, you can sometimes get frustrated by, like, do my customers actually understand the problem?
Yep.
If my customer is the NSC, or if my customer is the White House, or if my customer is the Hill, you have those notorious hearings from back in the day with like a senator asking Mark Zuckerberg how they make money. And it's
seared into my brain.
And there's this frustration where it's like, is government tied in enough with Silicon Valley to actually understand the world of tech and to understand these two dramatically different cultures with respect to tech advancement and great power competition? And I think, is government tied in enough to understand both and cross the bridge? And then also you have these people who are working in government who are making, their government salaries, and like the mission is very important. And that's why so many people go into government. but it's also like I was working on tech when I was with the government. And for me, at least, there was almost this realization that I could probably do more good outside the government than I could inside the government.
Yeah.
Because there's this intersection of public and private where the government needs to leverage the private sector more so and to a greater degree than they're doing right now, because the private sector has a lot of the expertise and also has the products that are going to potentially help us win in great power competition moving forward. So in the government, I could potentially inform policymakers about what's happening in different areas of tech, and help them better understand the problem. But if you want to be more of an operator on the ground, there is a benefit to leaving government and being on the private side of things and actually being an operator who's helping to advance things forward. And especially if you do sit on this intersection of public and private, you can be doing things that are directly benefiting the mission and directly benefiting the IC or benefiting the DoD, but you're going to be doing it on the private side of things.
Yeah.